You'll often hear people in Appalachia talk about faith healing. Some of the more common ones that come to mind are people who have the ability to stop blood. If someone's bleeding, they can do something that will stop the bleeding. Also, people that have the ability to take the fire out of a burn, means they take the pain away and the damaging properties of a burn, what happens to your skin. They can talk the fire out, is what it's called. Also, another common one is that you'll hear a lot about is people that have the ability to take off warts or to make warts disappear. Another one that I think of is the ability to stop or to cure thrush in a baby's mouth. If you've ever, maybe you've had a baby that had thrush or heard about it or whatever, it's like almost like a yeast infection that happens in a child, in an infant. Usually it's an infant's mouth, and you have hear about people who have the ability to blow in the child's mouth and cure the thrush. Now, of course, there's varying opinions about all this. There's people who say, that believers who say, well, those are God-given talents or God-given powers that give you the ability to do that. There's the other side that says anybody that believes that is not of God, that couldn't be of God. It's magic. It's conjuring. It's not actually biblical. So there's varying debates about it. But it's really interesting when you think about it, all the different ones. Now today I'm only going to talk about one. I'm going to talk about the wart situation, the ability to remove warts. In later videos maybe we can talk about the other ones, because it's all fascinating. And there's so many people that have documented proof, according to them. It's like so many other things in life that, sometimes the believer, you have to see it to believe it, those kind of things. So there's a lot of people that have those sort of stories. But today we're going to talk about wart removal in Appalachia. One of my favorite books about folk remedies in Appalachia is Folk Medicine in Southern Appalachia by Anthony Cavender, and the book is readily available. You can find it in a lot of different places, and it's a really interesting book. Today I was going to read you a little portion of what it has to say about warts. So Southern Appalachian folk medicine is abundant with beliefs about contracting and removing warts. Some of the more frequently mentioned naturalistic remedies were rubbing warts with castor oil, a chicken gizzard, a slice of Irish potato, we would say arse potato, bean leaves or stump water, and inserting a hot needle into the warts. I can't remember who it was, but somewhere I was with somebody, maybe when I was a child, and I saw that they heat the hot needle and put it in the wart. I can't remember exactly who that was, but I've seen that one done. Okay, back to the book. Even these, however, sometimes had a magical element, such as rubbing warts with castor oil for 9 mornings straight or washing with stump water in the light of a full moon. Of the many magical remedies used, one of the more frequently reported involved cutting a wart, letting it bleed on a grain of corn, and then feeding the corn to a chicken. Some people thought the chicken should be fed grains of corn equal to the number of warts to be removed. The underlying assumption was that the warts would be transferred to the chicken. I don't think I'd want my chickens to have warts either. Okay, the same assumption is evident in another remedy also documented in England and Ireland. It entailed gathering a stone for each wart, putting them in a paper bag, and placing the bag on the side of a road or at a crossroads. When the bag was picked up by some curious passerby, that person would also pick up or contract the warts. Rubbing one's warts with a dish rag and burying it, or placing it under a gutter spout, was another popular wart remedy. According to tradition, one must steal the dish rag from one's mother or grandmother. The underlying assumption of this remedy is that the essence of the warts is transferred to the dish rag, and as the dish rag decomposes, so will the warts. I like that one better than trying to give them to somebody else. Some other magical remedies were tying a knot on a string for each wart and burying the string, rubbing the warts while looking at a new moon and saying, "You grow and you go," rubbing the warts on a dead body, yikes, and selling the warts to another person for a penny a wart. Should these or any of the many other wart remedies fail, one sought a wart doctor who had the ability to conjure warts off by rubbing them with a hand and murmuring, "You grow and you go," or some other secret charm. So that's really interesting information from the book. Just fascinating to think about. I love old remedies of any kind of old folklore. And of course, I love anything connected to Appalachia. You already know that. But what I find most fascinating is over the years I've wrote about wart removal on the Blind Pig and the Acorn several times, and what I find, actually one of the posts is one of my most popular posts ever. All these years later, you know how whatever you put on the internet stays on the internet. All these years later, I still have people commenting on that post to tell me, to share what their experience was with getting warts removed, to share, you know, maybe whether it happened to them or to a family member or their grandma or grandpa or somebody like that. So those are the ones I find most fascinating, especially the ones that come from people who I've developed a relationship with. So there's a story, I'm going to share a few of the stories today with you, and the ones that are especially meaningful and fascinating to think about to me are the ones, one of them's from my mother-in-law. Of course, she's a member of my family, so I know her well enough to know that she's not making up stuff, or, you know, that she's telling the honest truth, all those kind of things. Another one is from a gentleman, Garland Davis. He's been a long time reader of the Blind Pig and the Acorn, and although I've never met him, I have this online relationship with him. I feel like he's one of my friends, one of my neighbors, and he's wrote for me over the years, wrote for the Blind Pig and the Acorn. So those are the ones that are really fascinating to me. Somebody I know personally that has a story about wart removal. So I'll start with the one from Garland. I had numerous warts on my hands. Everyone told me that they were caused by playing with toads and letting them pee on your hands. I remember thinking that wasn't right. I knew that I hadn't touched any toads. I remember trying to keep my hands in my pockets so that people wouldn't see my warts. My parents tried any number of homemade potions to no avail. Some things from the drugstore were tried, but again, no remedy for my warts. I remember going to the doctor and him telling them that I was too young to have them burned off. We carried my Granny Salmons to Yadkin County one Sunday afternoon to visit some friends. I remember that it was late in the day and Daddy was ready to leave. She told them to wait, that she was going to take me to get my warts witched. She led me for a long distance, probably not that far, but to a little boy quite a distance, down a path through the woods. We eventually came to a log house. An old is relative to my age at the time, woman came out and talked with my grandmother. Granny gave her a sack that she had brought. The old lady sat down on the stoop to the cabin door and started touching the warts on my hand. She then took a piece of cord and tied a number of knots in it. I later realized she was counting the warts and tied a knot for each one. She then hung the cord around my neck and led me by the hand around the yard. She then took the cord and went into the woods. She returned and told me that my warts would leave me to look for the cord. She said if I ever tried to find the cord, all my warts would return. We left and went back home. Within a few days, all my warts except one disappeared. I still have that one wart on the knuckle of my ring finger and have had it my whole life. I always figured that she missed it when she was counting. Now see, what a great story. So that was from Garland. Now I'm going to share the one from Miss Cindy, my mother-in-law. She says, when I was around 10 years old, I had a wart on my left thumb. It was on the side of my thumb at the knuckle. The wart measured about 3/8 inch across. That's fairly large on a 10-year-old hand. My folks took me to the doctor for removal. The doctor burned it off. It wasn't long until it came back, so it was back to the doctor. This time he cut it off, but again it come back. My cousin Zuli also had a wart. Hers was on the thumb also, but it was on the side growing partially into the nail. It was about the same size wart as mine. Her folks took her to a dermatologist. They were really concerned because of the way it grew into the fingernail. The dermatologist removed it several times, several different ways, and each time it grew back. My dad finally said, enough, get in the car, both of you. He took us to an old man in Henson Cove above Canton, not too far from my grandmother's house. I think the man's name was Mr. Hall. He looked at both warts, rubbed them, and then sent us on our way. I looked down a couple of weeks later and it was gone. I called Zuli and her wart was gone too. I don't know what to tell you or what happened. The warts were gone and they never returned. That's all I know. So that was her story. So just fascinating, you know, when you think about it. I have a few other ones I'll read from other people that I don't know. I don't have like a personal relationship with, but I found that they were interesting though. So my dad is 80 years old now, so I don't know if he still claims to be able to do this. However, I know firsthand that he has this ability and we've never been able to explain it. He said that he got it from his grandmother, who told him, you will have the gift too. When I was a kid, I had a wart on the back of my right hand. A cat scratched me through it and left a trail, and the length of the scratch turned into a puffed up wart-like scar. My mom told me to go to my dad with it, and he gently rubbed it without any medicine, home remedy, or other action. About a week or 2 weeks later, I noticed that the wart and cat scratch were gone. Would you love to know if there's any scientific reasoning in his body chemistry for this? So see, that's an interesting one. Could it be something in the wart doctor's physical makeup, in their chemistry? That's an interesting thought. Here's another one. When I was little, I had warts all over the backs of both hands. I lived in a small farming community in southeast Arkansas. My great aunt gave me some kernels of corn and told me to touch every wart with the corn, say a phrase, no idea what it is anymore, and throw the corn to the chickens. I did what I was told, and in a couple of weeks, all but one of them were gone. My mother told me later that she had wanted to tell me that it was just superstition, but after my warts disappeared, she knew I wouldn't believe her. I just wish I knew what it was that Aunt Jean told me to say. So this is a kind of a comical one. I had a wart on my wrist that popped up out of nowhere. I went to the dermatologist and had it burned off, and it came back. I was at my uncle's house and he saw it. He grabbed my hand, rubbed my wart with his thumb, and asked me why I wanted that thing on my arm. I went into this rant about how it was burned off and came back. He told me not to worry, that it would fall off soon and never come back. Sure enough, a few days later it was gone. That was 15 years ago, and it has not come back. Many other family members have similar stories. We've always joked the possibility that he takes the warts from us and his rear end is covered in them. Joking aside, I'm amazed that there is an entire thread on this phenomenon. I've got some crazy looks from people in the last 15 years when I tell my story. So I could go on and on reading comments that have been left over the years on the blog post on the Blind Pig and the Acorn. There's just so many people that have similar stories. There's a couple where someone used a dime and went around the outside of each wart and then kept the dime, or told it wasn't, so in some situations they keep it. In one situation they went around each little area of the wart with a dime and then said, go spend this money and forget where you spent it, and then in a matter of days the warts were gone. So there's all kinds of different little variations to it. It's just really fascinating to think about. So I've never had a wart, thank goodness. I've never had one. But when I was pregnant with Corey and Katie, I did have something, and I don't know the name of it at the time. Of course, the doctor told me, and it was this big long word that I couldn't even hardly say. But basically what happened, it was a place on my thumb, and I still have a scar there today. But he explained it like maybe I got a splinter right there, maybe I pricked my thumb with a pen, a needle, and didn't know it, something like that. I had some kind of little minor injury right there that I would have probably never noticed. But since I was pregnant, my body was like, oh no, let's go to help. So it sent so many resources there that it ended up growing like a little growth of cells there. It wasn't really a wart necessarily. It was really ugly though. But the worst part about it was every time I hit it on something, even the slightest little hit, it would start bleeding, and it would bleed everywhere. So it was terrible. I had to go to a surgeon, and they cut it off, and they told me it might come back, but thankfully it didn't come back. But that was some weird side effect of pregnancy, and as I said, I can't remember exactly what it was called. But when Matt and I first met years ago, we were still just dating. He had some warts on his hands. Well, I was just so took a shine to him the first time I ever seen him, so I wasn't worried about those warts, and I didn't even really think about them. Well, we'd probably been dating a couple of months when one day he asked me, said if I noticed that his warts were gone, and I looked at his hands, and I was like, well, no, I didn't really notice, but what happened? Did you get some medicine, or what happened? He said, no, I just started thinking about it, and every time I thought about them, I would rub them, and I just done that, and then all of a sudden they went away, they were gone. And so I couldn't, I teased him a lot. I was like, oh, you're one of those people that can remove warts. You've got this power, you could go into business and set up a little shop and be the wart remover for the area of Canton that we were in, Anyway, that's just a funny little story. But still, his warts disappeared, and he says all he did was rub them. Every time he would think about them, he would start rubbing them. So I'm sure some of you are going to say, well, Miss Tipper, what do you believe? What do you think about it? Well, I am a believer. I'm a believer in God, and I believe in faith healing. I believe that most people, I'm talking about me, have such shallow, small faith that we don't even understand the greatness of God and what He could do if we just had true faith, because I lack in that. But that's how I come at it, from the point of view of when I hear people like Miss Cindy and Garland, when they tell their stories, because I have a personal relationship with them, I believe them. I believe it. I don't think they're making it up. I don't think they're stretching or telling a tall tale. I really believe it. So I come at it like it's a faith healing, like it's belief, like those people that remove the warts have some kind of belief and faith that's greater than what I have. I lack in that. Like I said, I need to do better and try better. But other people, of course, don't believe that. And that's the most wonderful thing about the world we live in, is that everybody gets to have their own opinion. But I'll be greatly interested to know what you think about it, and greatly interested to see if you've got stories. Maybe you've got a story where you had a wart removed by somebody, or maybe your grandpa or grandma told you about it. I'd love to hear any kind of thing like that you've got to share with us. But mostly, as always, I just hope you'll keep dropping back by as we celebrate Appalachia.